Hello, and welcome to another episode of the FUMS podcast. I appreciate you hanging out with me again today. Today, I'm talking with a doctor of psychology, and we're talking about sexual dysfunction in MS and how to talk to your doctor about it. But before I introduce you to him, I want to remind you that I send out a great email newsletter every Tuesday called the FUMS Six Pack that features the top 6 topics in MS from that week. It's full of clickable links to stories, articles, research, all kinds of stuff. All the latest happenings in MS. I curate it for you. No work on your part. You get it delivered right to your email. So get on that email list at fumsnow.com/getthescoop. I also want to remind you that we have a downloadable ebook called Bowel and Bladder Issues in MS by Two Pea Brains with Potty Mouths Talking Shit About MS, written by an incredible pelvic health physical therapist who's so smart and offers so many great solutions. And me, a true smartass adding humor to an otherwise humorless subject. Get yours today at fumsnow.com/ebook. Today's guest is Dr. Fred Foley, professor of psychology at Yeshiva University in the Bronx, New York, and the director of neuropsychology and psychosocial research at the Multiple Sclerosis Center at Holy Name Medical Center in Teaneck, New Jersey. We're talking about MS and sex and how to get help. Thanks so much for being here today, Dr. Foley. This is such an important topic, and I appreciate you making time for us today.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for inviting me today. I'm honored to be here.
I did a ton of background research on you and on this subject, and it's been a little mind-blowing. But I watched a lot of interviews that you had done in preparation for this interview, and you stated that sexual dysfunction is very common in MS. Up to 80% of people with MS report having sexual concerns or issues. That is an overwhelming majority. So let's start with that. Let's start with talking about how common that is, both amongst the general public and those of us with MS.
Sure, Kathy. And yeah, in order to contextualize the frequency of sexual dysfunction in MS, we have to know, well, what's it like in the general population?
Right.
And many people are surprised to find it's quite common in the general population. 40 to 50% of adults in the United States between ages 18 and 65 report at least occasional sexual dysfunction.
Hmm.
So when you add MS into the mix, that percentage goes up quite a bit. We conducted a large epidemiology study on sexual dysfunction in the United States with over 8,000 patients and found that 68% of them reported significant and persistent sexual dysfunction, and a much higher percentage had, occasional to moderate sexual dysfunction. So this is almost universal
Yeah.
in MS, and yet it's one of the things that frequently doctors don't talk to their patients about or ask them about, and patients feel inhibited about talking to their doctors. So I
So
want to
true.
start off right now by saying the one thing, the most important thing that I have learned in my 30 plus years of working with patients with MS and their partners. The one thing that will help with sexual dysfunction more than anything else is just to begin by talking about it. Talk about it, with your physician, your healthcare providers, ask them about it, let them know you would like some help with that. And what patients have generally found, even if their providers don't know much about it, they will make the effort to refer you to someone who does. A good place to start also is requesting materials from the National MS Society
Mm-hmm.
to and other MS organizations on the topic to give you and your partner, materials that you can
Mm-hmm.
read and discuss together. So
Yeah,
that's where I'd like to begin.
that's perfect. And that's my hope in producing this podcast is getting people talking and making people more comfortable, and just I think starting with the knowledge that this is super common. You're not alone. This is really a common issue, and starting with talking and getting comfortable talking about it is the first step to getting help for it, and the first step to improving your life, which is what we all need to be doing, particularly with MS, right? So
Yes.
let's start with the types of sexual issues that are impacted by MS. I'm going to list them, and we'll kind of circle back, and you can define them and why they're issues in MS and what can be done to help improve them. So that would be primary sexual problems, secondary sexual problems, and tertiary sexual problems. So let's start with it. What's primary sexual problems? What does that mean?
Sure, Kathy. We define primary sexual dysfunction as dysfunction that occurs directly as a result of MS lesions. For example, if you have an MS lesion in the sacral area of the spinal cord, you're going to have a high probability of having genital numbness or altered genital sensations. And that's an example of a primary sexual dysfunction. Secondary and we'll talk more about the different types of primary, secondary, and tertiary dysfunctions.
Okay.
Secondary sexual dysfunctions are problems that occur indirectly due to MS symptoms. For example, if you have bladder or bowel problems, the nerves that mediate bladder problems are proximal to those that mediate some aspects of sexual functioning. So there's a high probability that you're going to have, some sexual problems if you have bladder or bowel issues, or if you have fatigue. Fatigue is perhaps the most common symptom in MS.
Truth.
And most people, when they're very fatigued, don't feel very sexy.
Right.
So, they're just trying to get through the moment. So that's another
fact.
example of an MS symptom that causes sexual problems that's not directly related to a lesion in the spinal cord affecting the sexual apparatus.
Got it.
And tertiary sexual dysfunctions are psychosocial and cultural issues that intersect with MS that lead to sexual dysfunction. For example, clinical depression is very common in MS. We know that about half of MS patients will have what's known as a major depressive episode during the course of their lives. And when people are clinically depressed, one of the more common symptoms is sexual dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
So likewise, in our studies, we found that that 60% of women with MS have body image concerns that they define as interfering significantly with their sexuality and their comfort with sexuality. So that would be another example of a tertiary problem.
Mm-hmm.
So we find that, over the years, I've learned really much from my patients, how to overcome all these problems. And I'd like to kind of talk about some of the more common ones in men and in women and what you can do about it.
Fantastic. I have a quick question. Where does medication fall in there? Because obviously that can make a big difference too.
Well, yes. Again, if you're taking a disease-modifying therapy and it's slowing the course of your MS or stopping it, you're going to feel better in general.
Right.
And so if you're feeling better in general, you're less likely to have sexual dysfunction. But there are some medications that patients take that cause sexual dysfunction. Mm-hmm. For example, the SSRI antidepressants, which are very commonly prescribed in MS because depression and anxiety is very common in MS, can directly cause sexual dysfunction really most of the time. Mm. So we encourage physicians to think about when they're prescribing antidepressants or anti-anxiety agents for patients, to think of those that don't cause sexual dysfunction mm-hmm. or cause less sexual dysfunction. Mm-hmm. So, it's important for the prescriber to be aware of that. And it's important for you to advocate for yourself. You're going to your healthcare provider, your MS healthcare provider, you're letting them know you're anxious and depressed and say, but I don't want you to give me something that's going to kill my sex drive.
Right.
So.
Because that will make me more anxious and depressed.
Right. It's right. Not going to make you happier.
Right.
That's for sure.
Exactly. Okay. Well, so let's talk about some of these primary sexual problems. You mentioned like if you have a lesion in the sacral area that it limits genital sensation. So, I mean, how do you have these lesions? how great if we could get rid of them, but we haven't figured that out just yet. So how do you combat these primary sexual problems?
Sure. First, I'm going to list, for you all, what are the top 5 symptoms that women complain of and men complain
Oh,
of,
excellent.
from our large study. So the number one symptom that women complain of is difficulty with orgasm. So that's their number one complaint.
Mm-hmm.
They have less intense, less pleasurable orgasms. Lack of sexual desire is also in the top 5 for women.
Mm-hmm.
And inadequate vaginal lubrication or wetness is another
Mm-hmm.
one.
Mm-hmm.
And genital numbness rounds out the top 5 for women.
Mm-hmm.
For men, difficulty achieving an erection is their number one complaint. That's true in every study of sexual dysfunction in men anywhere. That's their
Yeah,
number
not
one
just
complaint.
MS, right? Yeah.
No, not just MS. That's in the general
Right.
population as well. Also, in the MS population, a lack of confidence, men report, it significantly interferes in their sexual function. They lose confidence, and that kind of anxiety that accompanies that about kind of engaging in sexual behaviors really interferes for men, much more so than for women. Less intense or taking less intense orgasms and taking too long to orgasm, men also complain of. And in 5th place, same as women, less feeling or genital numbness is there, again,
Gotcha.
from lesions in the lower cord, typically.
Right.
So what can you do about these problems? And I guess that's what you would like me to talk about next.
Please, yeah.
Okay, so when we're starting with some of the primary problems, such as if there's, erectile dysfunction in men. Well, the good news for men is there's been so much research on erectile dysfunction that any man can be given an erection today.
Right.
So
the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes, the gift that keeps on giving. So there's oral medicines, for it. As we all know, sildenafil and tadalafil and other kind of medicines that help men obtain erections. There's also injectable medicines. Now, most men blanch when I talk about injecting their penis.
Yeah.
But it really just feels like the flick of a rubber band. It's a very small needle.
Who's signing up for that, though? Let's be honest.
Well, many men do.
Really?
And my patient, yeah,
I'm impressed.
Many men do if the oral medicines don't work. The oral medicines only help you maintain an erection. If you lose the ability to get one and to initiate one, well, then you're going to need an injectable.
Gotcha.
And among my MS patients, the men report very high satisfaction with it. In fact, one patient told me, Dr. Foley, this injectable med is great. It doesn't matter whether I'm awake, asleep, alive, or dead. It's going up.
Yay! So, the gold standard.
The gold standard. Right? So, and again, for women, who kind of report kind of loss of sex drive, commonly, that's a difficult symptom to overcome. I mean, the sexual response cycle is first you have desire, then you have arousal, and then, that arousal increases, there are changes in the body, there's increases in muscle tension that ultimately can lead to a climax. So, if you don't have sexual desire or libido, who wants to engage in sex?
Right.
But what we found in some of our studies is that if we can get women to think about it differently, they still have the capacity for arousal, even if they don't have drive. So we have them do something called body mapping exercises with their partners, where each partner takes turns in kind of touching the other person. And the goal here is not to have the person get an orgasm. The goal is just to teach the woman, if she has a loss of desire, to instruct her partner on exactly how she likes to be touched. She has to be in total control of this process and and get comfortable with it. And initially, we have them avoid the genitals just because that kind of makes people anxious if they don't
Mm-hmm.
have any desire. But what many women have found is that with these body mapping exercises, even if there isn't desire, they'll still be capable of arousal. So there are behavioral approaches and behavioral instructions we give that help with that problem. Um,
Wow. So interesting. And I like that. I mean, what you're saying is you take some power, really. The power is in your hands to help direct. Yes, that feels good. No, that doesn't feel good. Yes, that more of that, less of that. Is that right?
exact. That's exactly right.
I like that.
We empower women
Yeah.
to kind of learn because MS changes the body in certain ways, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to relearn, what your own body
Right.
feels like, what it likes and doesn't like, and this requires good communication. It requires, women to take charge,
Right.
you know,
What's the impact, I don't know, psychologically on the men? Do most like that, or is that in some way emasculating to some men?
um, in my experience, most men like it.
Mm,
Most men like when they're because if the partner, you know, wants to have sex,
yeah.
and
Right.
so if
I'm good as long as I get the end result. Just tell
exactly,
me what you like and we're in.
that's
Got it.
right.
Okay.
That's the way the majority of partners,
Right.
respond. There's a small percentage, as you mentioned, that might feel emasculated by, a woman taking charge, being in
Mm-hmm.
control, but it's
Mm-hmm.
really a very, very minority of men with deep insecurities that
Mm-hmm.
will experience that. In
That's
my
another podcast episode, right? We need to deal with that on another podcast.
Yes,
Got it. Well, I have a constant soundtrack running through my head of music always. And when you were talking about this, I thought of that song, I Got the Power. So I want to give that to the women. Think of that when you're having this body mapping session. You've got the power,
yes,
ladies. I like it.
right.
Excellent.
And common examples of secondary problems like fatigue, which
Mm,
affects both men and women.
yeah.
Uh, and since over 90% of patients with MS experience fatigue, it's very important to address this symptom
Yes.
because it interferes with sexual function. So
And
there are some
everything.
medications. Yeah, and everything.
Yeah.
Like you're right, it interferes with everything. Everything you want to do is compromised
Yes.
because of fatigue. So I had one couple I was working with. Um, she had MS and she was married. They had a couple small kids, and they
That's
hadn't had.
fatiguing enough right there.
That's exhausting enough. They hadn't had sex in
Yes.
over a year,
Yeah.
and they were kind of in their early 30s. It was still important to them both. But
Hmm.
she said at the end of the day, she had nothing left.
Right.
She worked. They both worked. They had two
Oh,
young kids. She had MS. She had fatigue, significant fatigue, and
yeah.
so the first thing I did was explain to her partner what MS fatigue is like because he didn't understand. He
Mm,
says, "Well, I'm
yes.
fatigued at the end of the day too." And I said, "No, no, 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 no. This is an illness fatigue." And
Yeah.
the only way I could think of getting through to him is I remembered once when I had something that I called the death flu. I had a
Mm,
high temperature, I had the flu, and I was so fatigued from the illness that I was lying on my couch and I really had to urinate. But I was thinking to myself, well, maybe I'll just let loose here. It just
yeah.
seems like too much
I'm
effort to
so
get up and go to
tired.
the
Right.
bathroom. So illness fatigue is very different. And he said, oh, he didn't get that at first. So he was able to then understand MS fatigue.
Right.
And I asked her when her fatigue was the least. And she said, well, it's in the mornings, it's the least. I said, well, can you become morning people when it
Yeah.
comes to having sex? And they both said no, they couldn't do that because they said, well, we think I get up, I think of all my things to do. They had the
Hmm.
values of work first, then play, but there was
Yeah.
never any energy left to play. So I
Hmm.
sent them home, and this is again, to get the message through to you about the most important part. I said, I want you to talk about this with each other. I want you to discuss it. I want you to brainstorm. And then I want to see you in a few weeks to see what you've come up with. So I want you to, to talk about it at least 3 times a week and brainstorm for a period of time. So they came back a few weeks later, smiling.
Mm.
And
They must have figured it out.
well, they did. They realized that they uh, both could take extended lunch hours on Fridays when the kids were in
Oh,
school and they
oh,
worked, not their
bonus.
commute wasn't very long. So they were able to rendezvous back at
Nice.
home on Fridays. And while they both still had energy and while her MS
Yeah.
fatigue was in check, and they were able to re-engage in an intimate and sexual relationship again.
Appointment
And
sex. Love it.
yeah, appointment sex, right? But they didn't have sex every Friday. But what they, what they told me was that they felt so empowered by figuring this out. They
Yeah.
knew the MS was going to throw them curves down the road. They felt
Hmm.
if they could overcome this, they can overcome, the future
Right.
curveballs that MS will throw at them.
Oh, that's
So,
great.
so it was a wonderful, empowering experience for them in much broader ways than just enabling them to regain a sex life again.
Yeah, I love that story because, as you pointed out, it was empowering. And so often, for sure in MS, I'm confident this is true in all diseases, you feel so powerless. It's like something just, set up shop in your body and is just taking over your life. And what can you do about it? But when you can find these things where you do have power and you can make a difference and it can impact your thinking and therefore your life and therefore your self-esteem. I mean, it's one thing after the other. It's just all good. So I love that story and especially about the part of just figuring stuff out because you're going to get curveballs. It's MS for God's sake. It is a constant curveball, but to know, to have that experience of having figured it out. Like, here's an issue, how are we going to figure it out? And you figure it out and you feel so good. You probably feel empowered then that whatever it throws at us next time, we can figure that out too.
That's right.
I love that.
So we did a number of studies on treatment of sexual dysfunction in MS. And one of them that we published, we found that just providing educational materials
Mm,
to, and this study we did with women because men have more treatment options. Most of the treatment studies on sexual dysfunction in the world have been done with men, not with women. So we want to do a study
shocker.
just, yeah, shocker, right? So we wanted to do a study just with women, and we did a randomized controlled trial where an MS nurse just provided women with MS. And first of all, she asked about sexual dysfunction for every person in the clinic.
That doesn't normally
And
happen, as we all know. We'll get to that point too. We'll talk about that, but yes. Sorry to interrupt.
that's that's okay, Kat. And those that uh, identified as having sexual dysfunction, she just gave them educational materials, book chapters on the topic in MS, educational materials on what to do about it, and then kind of referrals to local providers. If there were tertiary problems like body image concerns, sent them to a therapist to help them work that through.
Mm-hmm.
If there were primary problems, kind of tell the neurologist about it,
Right.
or go to a behavioral specialist who can give you advice on how to overcome these problems. So just by education
Yeah.
and giving local referrals, the significant changes in sexual improvement and sexual function occurred in the women in the trial.
Mm.
So, it doesn't take a lot, really. It takes education,
Mm-hmm.
start with educational materials and
Mm-hmm.
talking with your
Yeah.
healthcare provider about it.
Yeah. That's so key to everything. Before I hit record, I was mentioning to you that I see this particularly with sexual issues and bowel and bladder issues in MS because I am online 24/7, it feels like, talking about MS and in all these groups. And I see people come on there and ask these questions and what should I do? And does anybody else experience this? And yes, yes, yes. So many of us experience it. But my first response is always, what does your doctor say? And they'll get back to me and say, well, I haven't spoken to them. Well, it's a shame that your doctor hasn't asked you, but we have to be our own best advocate And we have to then initiate the conversation, which is tough for a lot of people. And I'm hoping that down the road you can give us a little further down here. You can give us some suggestions on how to bring that up maybe and talk about it more easily. But boy, if you can, everything you just said, it can be so impactful. It can be very small little changes that need to be made that can be impactful on your sex life, which then impacts your entire quality of life. So speak
Yes.
up, right? Ask the questions.
Speak up. And if for patients that have problems speaking up, what I advise you to do is write it down. Just
Yes.
write it down, and kind of bring the list of problems and, to your healthcare provider when you're going to see that person. So if you're inhibited about talking about it, just write it down and bring it with you,
Yeah.
or bring a partner with you
Yes.
who might feel more comfortable kind of raising the question for you.
Yes.
So
Love that.
yeah, and that makes it easier, to
Yeah.
bring up. Remember, your healthcare providers work for you. They are your employees. You have to tell them what to do. You have to tell them what you want, you know, help with. So this learned helplessness that occurs so frequently in MS, where, as you said before, Kathy, people just feel helpless, like a
Mm-hmm.
leaf at the mercy of the wind,
Right.
as if they, we have to get them out of thinking that way and to feel empowered, take control, and take charge of their healthcare and take charge of their healthcare provider by
Amen.
telling him or her what you want.
Yes. Dr. Foley, you're speaking my language. I think that this was my no, it was maybe two podcast episodes ago. It was all about, I was pissed off. I did a solo rant, and it was all about this subject that they are our employees. And I likened it to also politicians. So they are our employees. You need to go in with that mindset and then ask for what you need, ask for what you want, and expect it. Expect it. Expect that they're going to help you. And if they don't, there's somebody else out there too. So move on. But I love that. That is exactly right. Like go in, you're going in there to get help. So insist on getting that help, right?
And remember, you can hire them, you can fire them as well.
Amen.
You know,
Both doctors and politicians. Yes, you can. You
yes.
can hire them, you can fire them. Um, you made a couple of big points there about when you go in to talk to your doctor and writing everything down. I'm a huge advocate writing everything down because I forget. I get very nervous when I get in there and I forget
Sure.
something that I was going to say. So it'll help you not forget. But also, I would imagine if you're really nervous about bringing that up, I could just imagine like just looking down, sort of averting your eyes if that bothers you. You now have something to just read to the doctor. So you're not kind of having to come up with it on the fly. You don't even have to look at the doctor if this, wigs you out in some way, but you could just read the question. So I would think that that would be helpful. And also about the bringing somebody with you. I always say bring someone with you because in my own case, well, I have several issues in this because I am such a, oh, I don't know what the right word would be, but um, I put a positive spin on everything too. It's almost it's too much because I'll get in there and I'll say, well, in the last 6 months, nothing's happened. I've been great, no problem. And I truly believe that when I'm saying it. Hopefully someone is in there with me that knows me well enough to go, yeah, that's some bullshit right there. You have had, 5 flares. Remember when you had this and that happened? And do you remember when you fell? And all these things that I literally don't remember when I'm in there because it's like I put on this happy face and everything's great and no problems. But to your point, particularly with sexual health, if you can have your sexual partner come with you, I loved the example of what you just said about the fatigue and explaining the fatigue because this is such a huge problem in this community that people don't understand, and then therefore they minimize the issue, whether it be fatigue or anything else, and they can make someone feel, I hate using that terminology, but people can feel when they get that from their partners or their family members or friends that not only are they minimizing the disease, but they're questioning it. do you really have it, or are you making it a bigger thing than it is? So I love that a partner could be with you at your doctor's office and have a doctor like yourself so responsibly say, well, let me tell you, it's quite different from any fatigue that you know, and explaining that. And then I heard you say, like, that husband got it then. It's a shame that we can't explain it in a way that they just accept that. But oftentimes, you know, they're going to hear it differently from a doctor. So I love that idea. And that's so great. I hope more doctors are responsible like you were and really go into detail and make them understand it, because I'm confident that really shifted that relationship as well.
Yes, it did. And, unless you have MS, you really can't understand it. You
Truth.
know, uh, Even a loving partner,
Right.
is going to be understanding the symptoms from their point of view, and
Right.
it's not going to be accurate. So it's not the fault of the partner. It's just that it's very difficult to really understand what it's like and how
Yes.
the symptoms can fluctuate and what the symptoms actually feel like.
Right. Exactly. So getting that extra, you know, input from your doctor, I think would be super helpful for anyone. So bring your partners, swing your partners round and round, bring them with you to the
Yeah.
hoedown. I don't know. um,
And
I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
you mentioned bladder function a number of
Yeah.
times, and I work with a lot of both men and women around sexual functioning who have bladder issues. If, for example, many women are anxious because they uh, have bladder leakage when they're going to have sex,
Mm-hmm.
and they're concerned about that, and it makes them anxious and upset. When I usually bring the partners in the room and kind of just discuss it frankly and openly, most partners say, "I don't care."
Mm-hmm.
uh, and uh,
That's so great.
yeah, and there are things you can do to minimize, having a bladder accident during sex. You can, first of all, talk to your MS healthcare provider about it. I have, uh, you know, um, bladder problems, especially when I have sex. What
Mm-hmm.
can I do about that? There are a number of medicines that can help improve bladder function. There's self-catheterization, that
Mm-hmm.
some of my patients we advise to do before they're going to have sex to empty their bladders,
Mm-hmm.
ahead of time. Uh, there's you can restrict your fluid intake for a little while before.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, there's a lot of things that you can do.
Yeah.
But what I find is if you just talk to your partner about it, how anxious it makes you feel,
Mm-hmm.
most of the time they're going to say, it doesn't bother me.
Right. I don't
So,
care.
yeah,
I don't
they just
care.
want to relate
Yeah, and
sexually.
that's empowering to know also that that's not a big deal for them.
Right.
Much like I bet the body image is the same thing, right? Like we tend to think, "Oh my gosh, how could he be interested in me because I have this belly roll or whatever it is?" And he's going, "I never even noticed that. I don't care."
Right. I try to remind people that fat feels good in bed, that,
I love
and
that.
so, uh, yeah, I mean, women have twice as frequent body image problems in MS, I found, that interfere significantly in sexual functioning
Wow.
than men do. But,
Mm.
women are saturated in our society
Yes.
with images that depict, you know, what the ideal view of beauty is, that it's
Right.
extraordinarily distorted,
Yes.
that
Unattainable. Ridiculous.
unattainable. The average
Mm-hmm.
American fashion model is 5 foot 11 and a half inches tall and weighs 118 pounds.
God.
The average American woman is 5 foot 4.5 inches tall and weighs 155 pounds. So,
Mm-hmm. Disconnect.
yeah, the disconnect from reality kind of infiltrates,
Yeah.
women's sense of self to
Yes.
kind of lead to body image problems. And this is in the general population. It's not just in
True.
MS, but
Right.
when you throw MS in there, it just worsens it.
Yeah, true. Wow, that's so interesting. So, primary, secondary, tertiary, lots of potential issues for problems with sex, but lots of things you can do about it too, starting with talking, right? Talking,
Talking and get educational materials, talk
yeah.
with each other, and we teach people how to talk. A lot of people tell me, well, I don't know how to talk about sex with my partner. And so I tell them, well, just pick a time and place to talk about it where you're both comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and use educational materials, read some of the same things, and then discuss the article, on what to do about, sexual issues that are bothering you. And have an open, frank discussion uh, without any judgment,
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Yeah.
So be accepting of each other's points of view, even if
Right.
they're different. So
Yeah.
and 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 take those materials to your healthcare provider and say, hey, I want help with this.
Yeah, that's so good. And I just want to remind everybody that I will put in links here in the show notes to several places, like, for instance, the Multiple Sclerosis Society, National Multiple Sclerosis Society, because they have a lot of pamphlets and educational materials that can help with this, and some other things as well. And hopefully, this podcast has been very helpful to you too. So, yeah, education, talking, bringing your partner with you, bringing a list of things to talk to your doctor about, all can go a long way to helping. But bottom line, big news flash, there's help. There's a lot of sexual health issues for in MS, but there's help. The good news is there's help. There's hope. So
Definitely.
get educated and start talking, and then you can get busy and be happy. Is that the bottom line?
That's the bottom line, Kathy.
I like it. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Dr. Foley. If people want to learn more about you and your work, where do they go to find you?
Okay, they can find me at the MS Center at Holy Name Medical Center. They can find me at my university, Yeshiva University. I have if they just Google me, I'll come up at the university and at the hospital, and there'll be contact information, at the university, how to get a hold of me.
Excellent. And I will put the links in the show notes as well. So thank you, Dr. Foley. I so appreciate you being here and sharing all of this wealth of information that you have, and most importantly, hope. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Kathy.
Take care.
Take care.